for coming. It's such a wonderful honor to have Robert Pinsky here today. As an example, as an eminent, poet, translator, man of letters, teacher, anthologist, literary ambassador, family man, and clear-eyed witness to America's zeitgeist and character over the past half-century. Robert Pinsky has written both personally and publicly with a parallax vision. You know what that is? You can see. Bring an image together with both eyes. That has divined, on the one hand, what Walt Whitman called the genius of America's common people, and what on the other, J.D. McClatchy, the critic, called Robert Pinsky's gift for transforming those autobiographical myths we make out of memories into poetry. I was particularly curious at the outset of the long interview I conducted with Robert last year for the journal World Literature Today about what early personal experience prompted him to begin writing poetry in the first place. You know, always the first question, right? What book or fictional character in his youth had stirred him into thinking about poetry and literature in general? He responded, James Joyce's portrait of a young artist. As a young man, young artist, and as a young man, he said, he read very ambitiously Ulysses. I asked him why those books in particular. He wrote back that even at the young age of 12, he identified with Stephen Dedalus' desire to wake from the nightmare of history. In our lengthy conversation that followed, he wrote wisely, graciously, and knowledgeably about important moments in both his personal life and seminal career, in which he has excelled in so many stellar literary as well as personal ways. As a major American poet, accomplished saxophonist, editor, along with Maggie Dietz, the poet of four volumes of America's favorite poets. A three-time poet laureate of the country, translator along with Robert Hass of the Nobel Prize-winning Czesław Miłosz, and longtime professor of poetry and literature at Boston University. In addition to asking him about all these accomplishments, I derived just as much amusement and enlightenment from asking him about just what it was like growing up as a Jewish kid in Long Branch, New Jersey, about which he's written so memorably in his new memoir, Jersey Breaks, which caused me to realize after our last email exchange that the significant parts of his life and career served as exemplary sums in themselves, which in turn concatenate and then coalesce into an extraordinary sum of literary and service achievements that signify both myriad personal and national awakenings for their witness not only to the nightmare of human history, but also to the selfless heroism of a single brilliant poet who contains multitudes. Robert Pinsky.
Well, thank you very much, Chard. That's very kind. Now you've done inflicted the damage on me that I have to try to live up to that. Try my best, and thank you, Tina, as well. And of course, I'll be happy to sign books. And I'll warn you now, as Tina said, there'd be a 15-minute Q&A afterwards. I'm glad to do that. But I'm warning you that I sometimes depart from that idea where the person reads their work for 40 minutes or alas, sometimes more. And then there's questions afterwards. I sometimes like to stop in the middle So I may, after I read 4 or 5 poems to you, I might halfway through pause and invite questions or gentle remarks, kind remarks. I have made a kind of promise to myself that whenever I'm doing anything like this, reading poems, I will begin with the poem Incantation. It is my English version that is based on the Czesław Miłosz, the great Polish poet, was my friend and colleague when I taught at Berkeley. And this is Czesław's poem, my version of a translation of Czesław's poem. And it's important to me that he talks about philosophia. He had a Catholic, Thomistic, Augustinian education, which respects abstract ideas very, very much. In that worldview, ideas are more real than things. The concept podium or wood is more profound and lasting reality than this accidental version here. And person is more real. Even in some sense, if I have a soul, my soul is more important than what you are listening to me manipulate my breath and so forth. And philosophia, love of knowing, I think that pretty much means science and the relationship between science and poetry and ideas, 3 things. In this worldview that's behind the poem, they're all one thing. He calls it incantation because it's a kind of prayer. It's not necessarily the world as it is at this moment, but the world as it is as an immortal idea, as it is potentially and eventually. Incantation. Human reason is beautiful and invincible. No bars, no barbed wire, no pulping of books, no sentence of banishment can prevail against it. It establishes the universal ideas in language and guides our hand, so we write truth and justice with capital letters, lie and oppression with small. It puts what should be above things as they are. It is an enemy of despair and a friend of hope. It does not know Jew from Greek or slave from master, giving us the estate of the world to manage. It saves austere and transparent phrases from the filthy discord of tortured words. It says that everything is new under the sun, opens the congealed fist of the past. Beautiful and very young are philosophia and poetry, her ally in the service of the good. As late as yesterday, nature celebrated their birth. The news was brought to the mountains by a unicorn and an echo. Their friendship will be glorious. Their time has no limit. Their enemies have delivered themselves to destruction. Certain American academic critics have suggested to me that that poem must be ironic, that nobody would really write anything that high-minded. Nobody could begin a poem saying human reason is beautiful and invincible. And as someone who knew Czesław Miłosz pretty well for those years, I felt qualified to say, no, it's not ironic. I'll I'll read to you the poem I chose to put first in my selected poems. Then I'll read one or two quite recent ones. The poem's called Rhyme. I seem to be talking a lot to you, but so what? A favorable review of this book, a nice review, said it's just like Robert Pinsky to write a poem called Rhyme that does not rhyme. It does. You know, it doesn't rhyme like the time we ate a lime and we were sublime, but it is tongue, instrument, body, spirit, song, containment, ready, inherit, among elements, study, parrot. It just rhymes counterclockwise at an angle. I'll repeat myself. So what? Rhyme, air and instrument of the tongue. The tongue and instrument of the body and instrument of spirit, and spirit of being of the air. Each bird the medium of its song. Each song a world, a containment, like a hotel room, ready for us guests who inherit our compartment of time there. In the Joseph Cornell box, among ephemera as its element, the preserved bird, a study in spontaneous elegy, the parrot, art, mortal in its cornered sphere. Each room a stanza rung in a laddered filament, clambered by all us unsteady, chambered voices that share it, each one reciting, I too was here. I too was here, in the room, the rhyme, the song, in the box, in the box. Each element and instrument, the body still straining to parrot the spirit, a being of the air. I'll read one more from the selected poems, and then I'll get to the more recent ones. Samurai Song. When I had no roof, I made audacity my roof. When I had no supper, my eyes dined. When I had no eyes, I listened. When I had no ears, I thought. When I had no thought, I waited. When I had no father, I made care my father. When I had no mother, I embraced order. When I had no friend, I made quiet my friend. When I had no enemy, I opposed my body. When I had no temple, I made my voice my temple. I have no priest. My tongue is my choir. When I have no means, fortune is my means. When I have nothing, death will be my fortune. Need is my tactic. Detachment is my strategy. When I had no lover, I courted my sleep. I do have some books in between with me that I could read poems from, but I'll proceed to the most recent ones. As Chart in your well knows, poets are always thinking about whatever is the most recent. And there's always the anxiety that when you're not doing it, you don't have no right to say you're a poet. You were a poet when you wrote poems. But if you're not doing it now, you're just someone who once was a poet. So I'll read my most recent poem to you. I'm happy to say I finished this one this week. And when I say I'm happy, it's almost shameful. I could say I am smug to say that I just finished this one. It's called History of Meaning. Slogans are false. Non sequiturs make for meaning. Praised for his iron heart by Hitler himself. For what it's worth, Heydrich was a good musician. When I was a child, I was taught to believe what now I don't, that I have offended God by eating Taiwanese dumplings with pork and Chinese cabbage. The iron Heydrich put into Einsatzgruppen and Kristallnacht. In the fictional movie, Hangmen Also Die, Heydrich's assassin was played by the actor Brian Donlevy. The comic strip Zippy the Pinhead has what I mean by meaning. The Hollywood story was that a fat, bald man would show up on the set, and then he put on the girdle and the hairpiece. Brian Donlevy. That Heydrich was kind of Jewish was likely a lie spread by his enemies. In The Great McGinty, Donlevy and Akim Tamiroff really are great in a Preston Sturges way. For me, like Zippy the Pinhead, corruption, invention, evil, this and that, non sequiturs. When I was a child, I thought that praying aloud confirmed a power beyond the page, beyond myself. The Torah shows no vowels. For me, that meant my howling or grunting voice was a sacrifice, consumed by the shaping flames of flame-shaped consonants to attain the sacred embodiment of meaning. I'll read a couple more recent poems to you, and then I will, in fact, in the music business, I say we do requests. If somebody wants me to read a poem I haven't read, if anybody here knows my poems, I'll do that. Anyway, this is a poem, a fairly recent poem, called Old News. It's supposed to be in the recent Atlantic magazine. I haven't seen the magazine yet, but I think this is in the Atlantic. Old News. I keep on trying to live in the present moment, that lonesome place. I'm more at home in the past. I share a stack of magazines with someone who reads the new ones from the top. The bottom, salted with gilded ephemera, outspent ads, and failing or faded fads. That's just my meat. Praying that I'm not just blinding myself to horrors, I follow the Times online to study the face of fascism, its hand, its falsifying voice. I keep on thinking about it as I retreat to scan a home screen of my high school class, or posted shades of mortal veils and sorrows. The conversation floats down tunnels of fortune to the 9th grade. Joe Cittadino expelled for setting a fire in the Chattel Building attic. Joe died a while ago. Did people know that? Instead of hiding, as always before, in silent anonymity, I allow myself the homely civil pleasure of having something to say. Posting, I posted. Joe told me back then that it wasn't him. He took the blame to impress a girl. Her brother was Frankie Quinn, who really set the fire. And thank you, Junior Giordano, for writing. You were right, Robert. It was Frankie Quinn. Some of these recent poems are about men who, when I was a teenager and a child, seemed like notable and mysterious old men to me. They were probably about 25 or 30 years younger than I am now. They were figures in this small town, lower middle class ambience I grew up in. I'll read two of them to you and then we'll pause. I'll read to you Izzy Kasov and Italo Talarico. Izzy Kasov. Who was he? Why was he the one assigned to drive me from the house to the cemetery? The two of us in his Buick or Packard or some colonial make, DeSoto, Pontiac, Plymouth. I don't remember who had died, what aunt or uncle or cousin we were going to bury. I don't know why Izzy spent the hour-long drive lecturing a 12-year-old about the faults of Peggy Lee, whose singing he denounced. I barely knew who she was. Maybe he'd heard that I was musical. I do remember that was the year new cars were all bright colors, two-toned vermilion and baby blue, heraldic wing shapes with edgy arabesques of chrome. Some other uncle explained that 10 years after the war, it was to hell with black and khaki. People want spices. On the road to the graveyard, maybe the singer and I both stunk of the present. To Izzy Kasov. To Izzy Kasov, who married Dave Pinsky's sister and adopted Dave's daughter when the mother died. Maybe his grievance was not with death or music, but the great story of it all becoming past. Italo uses real name. I said that it says Italo Talarico, but really Marco Italo was Italo Tarantola, and I'll read it with the real name. Italo Tarantola. Sometimes I feel like ancient stereotypes govern me and everything I remember. My uncle Italo said because his wife Thelma and her family all looked like movie stars, they let it make them soft, not Jewish enough. What did Italo think he knew about it? Fresh out of law school, he applied to the FBI. Of course, they wouldn't admit an Italian, he said. Thelma was his secretary, taller than him. One of my teachers, smiling to make it sound bad, called Italo a Flemington lawyer. Meaning what? Why bring it up? Some long-forgotten slur from State House politics in Trenton, involving trucks of his uncle or cousin with Tarantola in fancy capitals down their length. An intricate ignorance gave me nearly personal pleasure at the sight of those big trucks. Thelma knows law better than I do, he said. Now, studying pictures of them at weddings or on a cruise or dancing at my bar mitzvah, I think a true cliche. The love of Italo's life was my Aunt Thelma. That Adorno quotation, no poetry possible after the Holocaust, the writing in disagreement with that statement, I think it falls into two categories. It fails to understand poetry and what poetry is. It's based on a sentimental assumption about poetry that, unlike Adorno writing, unlike any sports writer or columnist or any hack writer of any kind, the poet is somehow limited. Something's a poet, mustn't and can't be. So you could say it's a misconception, poetry, but perhaps more importantly, more significantly, it does not understand human beings. In whatever ethics I cling to, it's dangerous to claim that you don't have the Holocaust in your heart. Which of us can say, I have no meanness, I have no slavish obedience to the worst, if it looks customary and profitable to me? I can hope I would resist that. But the evidence of Europe, Christian Europe, in the 30s, the evidence of many other times and places, is that we ordinary people have in our hearts and in our brains the capacity for bottomless, endless evil. So it's a good, useful statement and provocative, but from those 2 points of view, there's something wrong with it. Can anybody raise a more profound question? Enough silliness. If I grew up around sheep and sheep herds and working dogs, I would write about sheep and shepherds and working dogs. If I grew up around monks or rabbis or scholars, I would write about monks or etc. I will answer the question by making a very sincere recommendation to everyone here to go to the best website to do with poetry. Favoritepoem.org. Favoritepoem.org. There you will see poems read and discussed not by poets, not by academic specialists or professors of poetry. You will hear the poems read aloud not by actors. You will hear the poem by Langston Hughes read by a Cambodian American high school student in San Jose who relates it to her family's experience in the horrible Khmer Rouge Pol Pot regime, its own kind of Holocaust. You'll see Walt Whitman in Leaves of Grass read by a construction worker. No actor can read a poem as well as those people do. Skilled as the actor may be, there's something that comes into a voice reading aloud when the person really loves the poem. Go to favoritepoem.org. And I'm not a superstitious person, but I have noticed that people who hear that website and then don't go to it, odd things happen to them. Diseases and losses of limbs. I'm not making any conclusions about it, but I do recommend favoritepoem.org to respond to that question. Whitman, by the way, is also read. There are three people who read, the construction worker reads it very well. We also have a noted Chinese filmmaker who, when he was a teenager, read Whitman in Chinese translation, and he was so impressed by it, he thought it was so important, that when he was around 15 or 16 years old, he wrote out some of it as an example of his sensitivity to a girl he had a crush on. And she immediately gave it to their teacher, who was also a secret police officer. And the Chinese director wound up in jail for a few days. And Mike Garuzione The hockey, the Miracle on Ice, we have him reading Whitman aloud. He remembers his father at the Italian family gatherings in a triple decker in Boston, reading aloud Whitman's Captain, My Captain in a very hammy, very flamboyant way to the family. And Michael Lucioni says, I can't, yes, the actor lives in the hair, but he's this other thing. So favoritepoem.org. Good question. The short answer is yes, of course. And I'm sure if I had enough time, I could find things about monks and scholars and rabbis. And I'm pretty sure I could find things about sheep and shepherds and working dogs as well in my writing. So I exaggerated, and it's very good of you to correct the exaggeration that you can write about a lot besides your immediate experience. Well, it makes a good starting place. And I'm now in my 80s, and I've only discovered an interest in Izzy Kassoff, who's another of Leo Gorsi, not the actor. He's a plumber from the father's, also named Leo Gorsi. In case anybody here is old enough to remember the actor. And that is an example of part of my experience. I was busy writing, in effect, about sheep for decades, and then I rediscovered Izzy Kassoff and Leo Gorsi, and went to literary territory. Questions about my translation published as The Inferno of Dante. It actually was on bestseller list for a while. It's been a successful translation. What inspired me to do it? A silly answer would be somebody offered me a contract to do it. And on the other hand, my generation of college students, because of the importance of Dante for Pound and Eliot and many others, it was important. And I studied with a great, great teacher, Francis Ferguson, author of The Idea of the Theater, and Francis, in his book about Dante's Theater of the Mind, actually does a lot of his own translation. He was the kind of critic who used his own translation of Greek tragedies. He was so learned, and he knew the European languages and the ancient languages. And he was also a completely unpretentious communicative teacher. So there's a lot of personal reason for Dante. And Dante also has an extremely eclectic mind. He liked pointing out that his book was forbidden by the Catholic Church for generations. It was on the index. He liked all kinds of things. He put all kinds of things together. My poem, I say non sequiturs. He liked to mix classical learning, his own grudges in local politics, a lot of Florentine, little various corrupt politicians and weird characters who have been forgotten within a few years. Now we study them in Central Theater. I could invoke models like the great Spanish poet Antonio Machado. A lot of the European modernists, at some point in their life, became fascinated by the roots of poetry, folk material. So on the one hand, compared to the first poems I read to you, Samurai Song, When I Had No Lover, When I Had No Roof, I Made Audacity in the Roof. They're very plain. And the later work, I'm aware that the hopping around the non sequitur, I can hope, doesn't extinguish the love of the plain. And that's something I find in Machado. Modernists like Alice Stevens or Mary. When I was at Rutgers, one of my classmates at Long Branch High School, I was voted most musical boy. I was known as the guy from the saxophone player. There also was Jim Ray, who's a big guy from the football team. And thanks to Jim, starting in my freshman year at Rutgers, I think I weighed 135 or 140 pounds. I was very thin. We lifted weights. And there are all these weightlifter slogans, no pain, no gain, and so forth. And it is like all forms of exercise. And one of the joys of playing sports, you're opposing your body. The body is lazy. The body has evolved to think that because as in animal life, the more sugar and the more fat, the better to keep you going. In our post-industrial life, the sugar and the fat that you crave may be destructive. And as we evolved, we exercised, we lifted heavy things, we climbed. Apparently, we're like other primates. Our ability to go up in a tree protected us from predators. Also, our ability to communicate with grunts, that was very important for survival too. So opposing your body, in my mind, is terrifically important. I perform with musicians still quite a lot. I'm a non-singing vocalist. If you can go online and see me with Bruce Springsteen on YouTube. I have CDs out. You can get it on Spotify. The most recent one is the same as the title of my recent book, Proverbs of Limbo. I do that with wonderful pianist. It's great musicians. And so I've done a lot of working with musicians. And yeah, I listen to music. I don't listen to music while I write. I start thinking about the music. I'd rather hear children arguing or something. Last question. Excellent, yes. Poem Shirt. I will resume the poetry reading with the poem Shirt, and I guess I'll aim to stop at about 6 minutes before 12. Shirt. The back, the yoke, the yardage, light seams, the nearly invisible stitches along the collar turned in a sweatshop by Koreans or Malaysians gossiping over tea and noodles on their break, or talking money or politics, while one fitted this arm piece with its overseam to the band of cuff, eye button at my wrist. The presser, the cutter, the ringer, the mangle, the needle, the union, the treadle, the bobbin, the code. The infamous blaze at the Triangle Factory in 1911. 146 died in the flames on the 9th floor. No hydrants, no fire escapes. The witness in the building across the street who watched how a young man helped a girl to step up to the windowsill, then held her out away from the masonry wall and let her drop. And then another, as if he were helping them up to enter a streetcar and not eternity. A third, before he dropped her, put her arms around his neck and kissed him. Then he held her into space and dropped her. Almost at once, he stepped to the sill himself. His jacket flared and fluttered up from his shirt as he came down, air filling up the legs of his gray trousers, like Hart Crane's bedlamite, shrill shirt blooming. Wonderful how the pattern matches perfectly across the placket and over the twin bar-tacked corners of both pockets, like a strict line or a major chord. Prints, plaids, checks, houndstooth, tattersall, madras. The clan tartans invented by mill owners, inspired by the clan tartans invented by mill owners, inspired by the hoax of Ashen to control their savage Scottish workers, tamed by a fabricated heraldry, MacGregor, Bailey, McMartin. The kilt devised for workers to wear among the clattering, dusty looms, weavers, carders, spinners. The loader, the docker, the navvy, the planter, the picker, the sorter sweating at her machine in a litter of cotton, as slaves in calico head rags sweated in fields. George Herbert, your descendant is a black lady in South Carolina. Her name is Irma, and she inspected my shirt. Its color and fit and feel and its clean smell have satisfied both her and me. We have called its cost and quality down to the buttons of simulated bone, the button holes, the sizing, the facing, the characters printed in black on neckband and tail, the shape, the labor, the color, the shade, the shirt. I'll close with a poem in a way related to that. This is another one of recent months. And I will be happy to sign books. The Angel of Retail. The Angel of Retail. Spirit of grace in the taffy machine's chrome arms at Morris's Candy, performing a saraband, unknitting and knitting again immaculate sweets. Spirit of order in a plank across uprights between us customers and visible bottles, a bar, barrier presence, attending to our pleasure. Angel of displays, recurrent and mortal and porous, dry goods and hardware. And the eyeless heads I recall as fearsome at the Lugos's ladies' hats. New spirits of the body, Pylades and threading, I needed explained in my ignorance not like that of those who hissed at thy unequal play the alchemist. O fie upon him, says Robert Herrick, son of a goldsmith, praising Ben Jonson. Like Hart Crane's Dauphin and Duke, Johnson's subtle the alchemist bilks us townfolk, selling Abel Drugger a magnet to attract customers. No joke, ruthless angel. In Greenwood, Oklahoma, murderous white rioters destroyed Eldridge's restaurant, Lewis's Meats and Sundries, more shocking than the bank, the church, more even than burning the movie theater named the Dixie. Lethal deviser, you removed the X-ray from Hirsch's footwear, you vendor of wonders, but only after I watched my live toes wiggle in monochrome space. Bill Russell bought Slade's Barbecue in your urban gaze, where Walter Benjamin would buy his shirts. The Nazis knew from you which windows to paint. In an upstairs Chinese restaurant, we immigrants looked white with Mugu Gai Pan. And across the hall lived the Denucci's, and at their Liberty Market, my grandfather bought the apple that to win a bet he threw high over the A&P Tower, your great Atlantic and Pacific Tea Company, now defunct. Or is that story of small-town prowess a legend, dreamt up by your offspring, Bruno Schultz, at home in his apartment above the family store? Many things.